Hi everyone, it's Jen again. Hope you're having a good week. This past week has been pretty exciting for me. I have been working very enthusiastically on my Halloween project, and so I wanted to make a video to just kind of talk about like where I'm at and what I've learned along the ways. So I think I've stated in previous videos that, one disclaimer, I am not a professional programmer. I have never taken any computer science classes. I am a self-taught hobbyist, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is me just using resources online to teach myself how to make these games, and a lot of times I brute force things in ways that are probably not ideal. I just like to throw out my process so that if you're somebody who's thinking about doing games as a hobby, it may seem a little bit less intimidating when this old 45-year-old lady who just started doing this 5 years ago is just making it happen. Okay, with that said, I don't usually spend a lot of time in the RenPy documentation, learning about formatting and stuff. Usually I will have a problem that I need to get solved. I will research it in that moment and I will find a solution, and that solution will serve its purpose for the next like 2 years or however long it takes me to finish that game. So it's been a while since I've been diving into like the options and the basic screens for RenPy, and I'm always reminded when that happens, oh yeah, like this is how I add outlines to the NVL text. Oh yeah, this is how I do this. And for whatever reason, certain things take longer for me to find solutions on, either because I've never done them before or I forgot, and like the documentation is just buried really deep, and or there's been some type of like change. I am sorry, my cat is... Okay, we're back from the cat. Alright, so I just wanted to go over sort of getting my feet wet again and starting a new project, how I start out, and some of the things that I've relearned along the way, to hopefully help out anybody else who might be starting out a project. This isn't going to be like a walkthrough or how-to style video. This is just going to be some like idea of like what it might be like and what are maybe like my common problems that I usually run into. So with the game that I'm working on, one of the things that I wanted to focus on was making it easy and accessible. I realized that a lot of like how I spend my leisure time is in bed on my phone, not usually at my computer or laptop, launching a game that I have to download and install. So I wanted to try to make a web-based game that was going to be easy to navigate on the phone, that wasn't going to feel like squished or like I didn't want the text to be difficult to read. So I really wanted to try to make it a vertical orientation that was like built specifically for viewing on phone. With RenPy, you can go in and make custom dimensions. I knew that this was mean that a lot of, or almost all of like the GUI was going to need like tweaking, and anybody who's worked in RenPy trying to customize the GUI would know that it can be a bit cumbersome to try to go through the options and the screen menus looking for those little lines of code where you want to like adjust the alignment of text, especially, I would say. All those little H boxes, V boxes, screens, and preferences can just be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So I did go ahead and use Fenrik's RenPy GUI, Easy GUI, and I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the description below if you want to give it a try. One of the really nice things about it is it breaks up the screens here neatly into these little individual files. So like if I want to go in and affect the choice dialog screens, here it is. I don't have to scroll through like hundreds and hundreds of lines of code trying to find it, trying to do a keyword search. Here it is, and I really like how everything's like split up. Like, sorry, I'm just having all kinds of issues with like sinuses today. I wonder if this video was meant to happen. Okay, so let me go back a step. Here's my original documentation of my idea, character breakdown, setting, chapter outline, very brief overview. Here's my expanded Google Sheets of just different project-related information in hopefully concise ways. So we've got voice lines for characters, we've got stat skills that I'm planning on implementing, we've got assets listed here, we've got backgrounds, animations, sprites planned, and things like that. I have them all in their own little columns because that way I can just kind of populate my tasks with the different asset categorizations here. I don't know, I've been getting very into organizing, trying to organize my process and figure out what the heck I'm doing. For the most part, I was able to stay on target for this past week with getting what I hope to be like the working build of the prologue done. And yeah, a lot of it was just trying to move things around so that it would look okay on a vertical orientation. When I launched the project on the web browser here, we're going to see that there's a lot of empty space on the sides because of the vertical orientation when we're on a computer screen. But when we launch it on the phone, it goes ahead and fills up everything. Unlike my usual games where I have like exploration, this is going to be very minimal. There's no animations like there is in my other games as well. I'm trying to stay, I'm trying to keep my asset load down. When I was experimenting a little bit with the web publishing from RenPY, I was just curious to see what the web format can handle. So I started trying to export when I was working on EXG. But I started with the combat system when I was working in EXG, so like pretty much by the time I finished the combat system, I was already at like a file limit cap where I could no longer export to EXG, so it was starting to take a really long time to load when I could even upload the combat system. As soon as I started doing dungeon exploration, it could no longer handle it, and so suffice to say that it wouldn't have been able to handle the social sim portion of the game either. This is me stepping back. We still have some stats here because this is the way that I like to weigh the player choices and give them some agency in building their story and character. So you can see when we answer questions, we are going to get the stat gain here. Now, one of the things that you can see here is that I was trying to keep the GUI minimal as far as like things like stats and menus, because I think those will like be awkward to have to navigate on the phone. I wanted it to be pretty concise, but there's no indication here as to what these stats are. So like this was a stat in empathy, but the icons are kind of too small to really be able to like convey that this is your empathy stat here. I did go ahead and correct this on the current build that I'm working on. So now we can see when we hover over, it's going to tell us at a kind of an expanded tooltip here what these things are, as well as over here. So the stats that I'm going to be tracking with the player are going to be their approach to problem solving, whether it be logic, empathy, or power. these stats will eventually unlock abilities for the player to be able to use certain techniques to resolve issues with the other characters, whether it be intimidation, overpowering, coerciveness, those sorts of things with power, whether it be like pleading or trying to convince with like empathy, that sort of thing. I didn't want the player to be completely locked into one type of resolution. So like if I have mainly building power in order to, I guess, have the types of options that I would want to convince or to overpower the other characters to do what I want them to do. I don't want to feel like the player is stuck always having to answer all questions related to power, or else they no longer have those options available. So that's where I came up with the blood system, that the player also has this pool of excess resources that they can tap into to use different techniques. So let's say that I have a character that's built mainly around logic, but for one situation I really want to use an empathetic option, or I want to use a power option, or maybe I just want to make a well-rounded character because I don't like having to rely on only one strategy. The blood system is going to let the player tap into this extra resource to compensate for any lacking stat here. So if the player needs to have like logic of 5 and they only have logic of 3, rather than completely locking them out of using logic as a possible option, it would just tap into their kind of extra resource here. It would cost like an additional, 2 or 3 blood for them to use that option to overcome that stat check, if that makes any sense. So there's still going to be incentive to build these stats up to have access to the resolutions that the player would want, because the blood resource is also a finite amount of wiggle room. So hopefully that will just give the player a little bit more flexibility to answer questions how they most feel represents their character, as well as being able to, resolve it in however they want. And there's just going to be an additional cost associated with that. So that's kind of the system that I have there. This was another one of those like little weird things that it seemed like really easy in my mind to implement. Like, oh, I've made like a combat system and all these other things, the exploration systems, and like, faux 3D travel. Like, this should be easy, but for whatever reason, I get like hung up on it. Because if you haven't had to create this, then like it's not something that is really like in your mindset to create. So I thought I would just throw this out here, what my solution was for making this like hover text that's just basically serving like a tooltip, without having any other like functionality on like actually using these image buttons to click. So what does this look like? What we have here is, this is my stat screen. I have it on Z order 6 to make sure that it's on top of this border, because this border doesn't disappear. This screen stays on screen, and I wanted it to overlap with other screens. I wanted it to be in the forefront. So Z order is a great way of like kind of controlling how these screen elements like stack on top of each other. Like, oh, we want to make sure that our quick save or quick options menu buttons are on the top here, but I also want to have these stat buttons on top of the frame, but I also want this frame to be on top of the dialog box. So like when we start getting into to having like this type of dialog text box tends to want to go over on top of everything. So using this Z order, make sure that that box is always going to be behind. My frame border is going to be behind. these stat GUI buttons that I want to have on top, which are also going to be behind this quick menu. I find that Z order is just kind of the easiest way to make sure that everything is in the order that I want it to be using screens. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're going to have these vboxes to put our image buttons inside of. So this particular one is this this blood value that we have here, which is our bar, our gauge here. So when this gets depleted, we have our minimum and maximum, our value range here, which is going to be the MC's like current blood points, and then their maximum blood points represented, and the vertical bar is going to be true. This is going to be the pixel dimensions of the bar, and then as far as like how it's visually represented is going to be in our GUI and our bars. So we have the top and the bottom, that being full, and this being empty. Okay. I'm going to go back to the displays here. With the little hover blood bar thing, or hover blood indicator here, or the expanded tooltip that I wanted to have shown, we have, first of all, the image button itself, which is this little blood splatter, right? That's in our images here. And yeah, I think it's just in the images. I think it's drip. Drip, drip, drip. I didn't think I put it in anything special. Yes, drip. So we have drip, we have the drip idle, and then we have the drip hover so that it changes color, so that the black frame stands out more. The frame is the same frame that's used to, anytime you basically call for the frame, so it's here when you're doing confirmations and stuff too. It's just scaled down. So that's what that like padding thing is. When we go into looking at how the text is displayed. But let me go first back to the image button itself. Doesn't serve any purpose other than to indicate that something's been hovered over. So we have the idle and the hover. We have to put that the action is null, or else it won't activate when you hover. You have to have some type of action, or else RenPy will not distinguish between idle and hover. We have hovered here to set the variable of blood to hovered when it's hovered over, and then when it's not hovered over, it's going to set the variable blood to unhovered. Default of the variable blood is unhovered. Okay, so when it's unhovered, we have this this other vbox here, that when blood is hovered, we are going to show the extended tooltip text, and this is again that frame. We have like the little padding around it, and the alignment for it. Okay, so we're going to show that this is your blood value, and we're going to show that the current blood value and the maximum blood value when you hover over it. When it's not hovered over and the condition is unhovered, it's just going to show this as default. Now that one was pretty easy because the padding of the frame is kind of hidden by the black, so you can't really see too well like how it kind of gets a little bit like off-centered or anything when you add stuff to it. Basically like things don't shift around too much when you do the tooltip. With these little guys, things got shifted around a lot. So using the same concept there, we have the default when nothing is hovered over. We have just the text, and that is in this vbox that has this alignment and this spacing between the 3 elements. Now when I start adding the frame and the words, it actually makes all these things like shift around because there's a little extra space around, that it kind of like screws up the spacing between all the objects. So then I had to go in and adjust the X and Y positioning to make it so that it didn't look like the little icons were moving around. So to just give you an idea of what that looks like without this little X position and Y position like adjustment here, like if I get rid of that, oops, let's just get rid of it, and if I save it here, you can see how it made this thing like move around. So I had to go in here and yeah, pretty much like tweak in by the pixel to try to get rid of that really off-putting like shift. Now there might be another way to do this so that it doesn't do this weird shift, but I didn't want to have the frame around the singular numbers because it didn't look aesthetically the way I wanted it to look with just the idle button. So we went in, we did it this way. Another fun little thing that I enjoyed doing, or I should say that was like kind of an interesting challenge that I felt added a bit to the overall like immersion to the game, a little bit more fun, is because I don't have very much actual gameplay in this game. I wanted to have more of an indicator for when the player is gaining stats, other than just representing it visually up here. Now we are also going to have this call statement that is going to play every time that the player gets a stat increase. So I have that under calls, so that every time I can just do a call statement here to have the stat increase, show the screen, do the little bell notification. I have a hard pause in here. It's a very short hard pause just to make sure that they don't miss that graphic, and then hide the screen. So the screen itself, we're going to go into displays again. Pretty simple. Again, Z order is higher than the Z order for the stats because I want it to show on top of it. We are showing the image of the stat icon. The stat icon has a transform that I made, a boost, which it starts out zoomed at 100% at this particular positioning. And then we're going to zoom out, so we're going to make it get a little bit bigger. And then we're going to zoom in and make it get a little smaller. So what that looks like in the game is like that. So it looks like it's kind of like grabbing your attention by getting larger and then zooming into the corner, like it's getting absorbed by these icons, and now you can see. We're going to go back. Let's do it one more time. So we can see that our empathy is 0. Once we've made our choice, done the dialogue, we get empathy +1, and now we got a +1 there. It's not absolutely perfect as far as like, oh, maybe we could have gotten it to like actually sit on top of the icon itself. Doing transform positioning is a little bit like getting into the animation aspect of the transforms. I didn't want to go that deep. This was just kind of a way of me like fudging it without having to actually like move the positioning by just scaling it to go in that direction. It makes it look like it's kind of moving into the corner even though all it's doing is scaling. Yeah. Take it for what you will. That's my my little hack to try to get that effect. You can see when I launch it on my phone from the website, fills up the screen. We've got a loading time here. Not too bad. Alright. Game launches full screen. Fonts I had to keep simple and large so that it would be very legible. Same with like spacing on the buttons and everything, just to make sure that like anybody with like larger hands like mine can still select what they want to select. The saving and loading seems to be working fine, or when I leave the website and come back to it. So yeah, this has been my project, and I've been having a lot of fun with it, and it's been kind of, I guess, refreshing to go back to just working with the basic elements of Visual Novel. Hope you're having a good week. If you're working on anything, feel free to share. As always, hope you enjoy the process, and take care.